And allow me to thank first the organizers from the Amnesty-Cambridge University, you, Sahar, for organizing this. Eva, Morris, and Matt Barrier, are they here? Eva and Matt, thank you very much for putting this together. Also, thank you to all of you who are here today in attendance. Palestine, my friends, remains one of the most pressing issues in world politics today, as you all know. I hope this talk will help shed some light on the situation. I need luck to do it in 20 minutes or so, but I'll try my best. I have been asked to talk about the system of apartheid that has been established in Palestine and that has been laid bare by a number of Palestinian, Israeli, and international human rights organizations. Israel's systems of apartheid was detailed comprehensively in the Amnesty International's report released in February last year. An impressive, I must say, an impressive work that even before it was released was dismissed by some as anti-Semitic, by the Israeli government particularly, and by Israel supporters worldwide. It is a sad statement about the Palestinian issue that any narrative that does not buy wholesale into Israel's camera obscura, you know the term camera obscura, that does not buy into that camera obscura version of reality is immediately labeled as anti-Semitic, terrorist, labeled this and that by those who would protect Israel from any scrutiny. Sad, but a reality. This is, of course, not about anti-Semitism, but about stifling any proper debate on Palestine. Don't take my words or anybody else's words for this. At the beginning of this month, 169 prominent American Jewish leaders said those who use accusations of anti-Semitism as a political weapon only poison the debate. My contention is that the debate is meant to be poisoned, my friends. The debate is meant to be poisoned, that the terms of debate are fixed from the outset. The terms of the debate are fixed from the outset precisely to allow Israel to escape accountability. The apartheid issue is an example. While it is great that the world's human rights organizations have woken up to the reality of life in Palestine, it is, from a Palestinian perspective, a matter of better late than never. The truth, of course, is that a form of apartheid understood in its most basic form is as the unequal application of basic rights to different peoples. The unequal application of basic rights to different peoples. This was foundational to Israel. I'll say it again. And that's why I say it better late than never. Please come in. The unequal application of basic right to different people was foundational to Israel. Israel was never meant to be a state for all of its people. From its inception, it was never meant to be a state for all of its people. It was meant to be a state for the Jewish people. But there was an indigenous people already in Palestine. So the only way this could happen, and indeed the way it did happen, was through the wholesale dispossession and expulsion of that indigenous population from Palestine. Some 2/3 of all Palestinians at the time, around 800,000, wounded up in neighboring countries or further away in the 1947-49 Nakba catastrophe, giving birth to the Palestinian refugee issue. I am one of the outcomes of that. I was born in a refugee camp to the very south of Gaza, the Rafah Shabura refugee camp, because my own parents and grandparents did see that wholesale dispossession in 1948. And once people had fled or been forced to flee, the Israeli state acted quickly to make that reality permanent. Thus, in 1950, Israel's parliament passed a law, 1950, the absentee property law, that made clear that anyone who had fled Palestine to enemy countries, meaning neighboring countries, were thus defined at the time as enemy countries, neighboring countries. Anyone who had fled Palestine would forfeit their lands and properties to the states. This was not one rule for all. The Jews were and are granted citizenship in Israel regardless of where they were born. So this law, by extension, would only apply to the Palestinian people. It was designed to be applied to the Palestinian people. Further, you didn't even have to flee the country to lose your lands or homes. You did not even have to flee the country to lose your lands and homes. A new category for which Kafka, if some of you know Kafka or read the Kafka novels, Kafka would be proud of. A new category was invented called present absentees. Have you heard of the present absentee? In order to also confiscate the properties of those who fled their homes but wounded up on the Israeli side of the border, inside what Israel controls. You are present but absent at the very same time. Imagine being a present absentee. It's a remarkable superpower to both hear and not hear at the very same time. What are we, aliens? Now they're shooting balloons. What are we? But that is the essence of the foundation of the State of Israel. And that's why I said better late than never. People thought that amnesty has really revealed something. This has been happening for a long time. So my friends, the 1967 occupation of the rest of historic Palestine, as well as the Sinai and the Golan Heights, introduced a new phase in Israel's apartheid regime, apartheid system, where Palestinians in Israel were eventually granted citizenship. Almost 20% of the population. However, unequal after living under martial law from 1948 to 1966. The Palestinian citizens of Israel were under martial law, military law. Palestinians of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza, were an occupied people from the start until now. 55 years on, remain an occupied people. What does it mean to be an occupied people? It means to live under military rule. It's as simple as that. What does that mean? Well, in Palestine, it means being subject to military courts, military detention, and arbitrary rule of commanding officers. At will. 18-year boys with very big rifles. There is detention without trial. I'm sure you have seen in the Amnesty report and in other reports, the detention without trial, without legal representation, and detention relying on secret evidence that mean ultimately military courts simply rubber stamp detentions. Unsurprisingly, my friends, the conviction rate in the Israeli military courts is over 99%. 99%. According to the UN and Israeli rights groups. A military occupation also means brutality, because the logic of military occupation demands that the occupied people is subjugated. That's the heart of military occupation, the subjugation. So it necessitates brutality. It requires brutality. Last year, more than 230 Palestinians were killed in the occupied territory, 148 killed in the West Bank, which was the highest number since the UN started record 20 years ago. Gaza, where I am from, and many of your colleagues here, students of Cambridge, are from, has suffered much worse in the recent years. Thousands were killed there in 3 all-out military assaults in 2008, 2012, 2014. And in May 2021, more than 250 people were killed in 2 weeks. These are staggering numbers, my friends. These are not just numbers. I have a colleague here who has helped found an organization, and he's also a Palestinian from Gaza, and he just joined us as a fresh new diplomat in our mission, but they established an organization called We Are Not Numbers. These are not numbers, these are staggering cases of loss of life, human beings. Each one of them have a story and have a parent and have a friends and ambitions and dreams, friends. And they show no sign of abating. Thus, Israel is maintaining a nearly 1 Palestinian killed every single day, the rate for this year. 1 every day. In January this year, 35 Palestinians were shot dead by the Israeli army. And there is no accountability. In perhaps a perfect mirror image of the military's conviction rate for Palestinians, which we just spoke about, 99%, in a perfect mirror image of the military's conviction rate for Palestinians, less than 1% of its own soldiers accused of abuses are convicted. Less than 1%, while the Palestinian conviction rate is 99%. As you may imagine, accusations are normally shut down before they reach any trial. For the Israeli soldiers or settlers, the illegal colonial settlers. Thus, just 20% of accusations made it to court, according to Israeli right group Yesh Din. As you also imagine, Palestinians have very little faith in any kind of Israeli court process or system, because these courts are not set up to arbitrate fairly. They're not set up for that. They're set up as part of the military occupation, which necessitates what? Brutality and subjugation. Most accusations never see the light, as I said, of the day, because everyone understands they will not get a fair hearing, including Palestinians. They know they will not get a fair hearing from this system. So, my friends, this is of course not all. Every military checkpoint, every military incursion, every late night knock on the door, every home demolished or relative detained, every school ransacked or village destroyed is in fact an abuse, and we have that on a daily basis. Those of you who have lived in Palestine know this. It's an abuse that requires legal process. Israel long ago ceased to be merely an occupying force. The minute the first settlers set foot in occupied territory, Israel became a colonizing power intent on expanding its territory. It's an expansionist, colonial expansionist regime. With these colonial aspirations came a system of apartheid in the occupied territories that saw one set of laws and rights for one set of people, the Jewish settlers in the occupied territories, and another set of laws and rights for the indigenous population. I mean, how can it be more clear? Is this apartheid or not apartheid? Thus, we have bypass roads for settlers, whose ease of transit in and out of occupied territory is matched only by the near impossibility, the sheer difficulty of Palestinians to travel through occupied territory, let alone in and out of the occupied territory. So special infrastructure, special roads, bypass roads to ease their travel. A whole lot of infrastructure for those who travel in the West Bank. Special highways. While in our case, it's hundreds of roadblocks and checkpoints, in addition to the wall and all that you know. So the illegal settlers are under civil law, but the Palestinians are under, in the very same area, are under martial law, military law. We have settlers illegally allowed to bear arms. You see them all the time. Unlike Palestinians, even though we are regularly the victims of the illegal settler violence, we have a land use system that grants easy building permits, very easy building, illegally. building permits for constantly expanding these illegal colonies, colonial settlements, while Palestinians are absolutely prevented and their homes are demolished. So it's almost impossible, near impossible, to take permission from the military for building. Especially in Area C, so-called Area C, which consists of at least 64% of the West Bank. And the list goes on. Farmers have to traverse heavily manned checkpoints to cultivate their lands. Families cannot expand their homes due to building restrictions, and children cannot go to school due to travel restrictions in particular areas. If you live in H1, H2 in Hebron, it's a story. It's a huge hassle to even begin to think, how do you send your kids to school? How do you guarantee their safety to come back? That is normal life for us in the occupied territories. That is the normal life for our people back home. At every juncture, we are rebuffed, rejected, and restricted. We are treated as a second or third class people and subjugated. So my friends, inside Israel, I could point to the nation-state law, and I'm sure some of you who are interested in the case have studied the nation-state law that was passed by the Knesset a few years ago. If I remember correctly, it was 2018, if I'm not mistaken, which holds that the exercise, this is the law, the exercise of national rights is unique to the Jewish people. So the law is deliberately designed, legislated to deny collective rights, national rights, for the 20% of Palestinians who hold Israeli citizenship. That's the heart of that. The right of self-determination is exclusive to one religion, to one race. I could point to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's latest interview with the CNN, and I followed him in that interview to rebuff his historic negationism and denialism, gross distortions of historic facts, in which he declared, Netanyahu, that those exclusively Jewish national rights that those exclusively, again, Jewish national rights extend even over the 1967 occupied territories. So now they are public on CNN and everywhere telling you that that right of self-determination is not just inside the 1948 areas, it's also the 1967, i.e. the occupied West Bank and Gaza. I could talk about Israel's family reunification laws, which stop Palestinians in Israel from exercising their right to marry whom they love. I could point to citizenship laws that allow Israel to strip people of their citizenship should they show insufficient loyalty to the states. I'm sure you followed, some of you, the recent approval of a law that strips citizens of their citizenship. And who defines and who decides and what are the criteria? I could point to all these things, my friend. There are dozens of examples of discrimination in law against the 20% of Israel's population that is Palestinians. But, and this is the point I want to make here, and please bear with me. Unlike South Africa, Israel's apartheid is not an end in itself. I want to stress this point. Israel's apartheid is not an end in itself. Thank you. Israel's apartheid is not an end in itself because Israel's apartheid is a means to an end. And that end is the complete colonization of the entire area of Palestine, from the river to the sea. So, like occupation is a tool, like besiegement of an entire people in Gaza is a tool, apartheid is a tool. Apartheid is a tool, and the end, as I said, a tool for the complete colonization of the entire area of Palestine from the river to the sea. Again, this is not a secret. Even though we embarked on the Oslo negotiations process that was meant to end with a two-state outcome almost 30 years ago and was backed by the international community, we are now further away from the possibility than when we were in 1993. What's more, What's perhaps most frustrating here is that none of this is new, unknown or unreported. All what I said is absolutely known, reported, documented, not by me or us, by the United Nations, by the Amnesty International, and what have you. On the contrary, every abuse I have here listed is well known to everyone who pays even a scant of attention to the situation. Settlements are probably the best example, my friends. There is no hiding these red-roofed monsters, actually, spreading right across occupied territory. Usually on easy-to-defend hilltops, they take the top of mountains, with checkpoints, military bases, and what have you. International law is very clear on what settlements are. War crimes. That's exactly how international law describes the illegal settlements. War crimes. An occupying force to transfer its civilian population onto the occupied territory and displace the original indigenous native population is a war crime. Nor there is any doubt about what these settlements are supposed to accomplish. Everybody knows what are they supposed to accomplish. This is annexation, all but in name. The total control over Palestine. After all, no country extends that amount of money and moves that number of people. We're talking about more than 750,000 illegal settlers already in the occupied West Bank. No country extends that amount of money and moves that number of people into occupied territory if this is just a temporary measure. It is not. It is meant to be permanent for Israel. And yet, despite a settlement project that is as old as the occupation itself, they started building these illegal settlements day one. After the military occupation of 1967, what has the international community done about these war crimes? This is the question. Well, they are still there. They are still growing, I mean the settlements. Successive Israeli governments have been crystal clear that they have no intention of slowing, at least slowing, the illegal settlement project, let alone ending it, or reversing what is an unmistakable and completely transparent land grab. It's a land grab exercise. And the international community, my friends, responds so far, the US-led international community. We hear the occasional muttering about international law and how settlements are obstacle to a two-state solution, including yesterday there was a statement by the US, the UK, France, Germany, Italy, if I remember. And all of them said, we are dismayed at the Israeli government announcement. Dismay was the note. They don't say condemn, never. When it comes to Palestinian, react. We condemn in the stronger terms. But when it comes to the illegality that mounts to a war crime, dismay, concern is they are dismayed. Fine, good that you're dismayed. But then what follows from the dismay? But we see no action. There's no action for decades. And without action, there is no accountability. And there are options, my friends. It's not like the international community has no option. There are options. Certainly there are. We could start with a clear position that settlements are illegal and therefore should not be traded with. Should not be traded with. I mean, is that difficult? I mean, this country bans the import of the ivory product, right? Because it's illegal to trade in ivory product. And this country, so is the US and many other countries, in the West particularly, considers settlements to be clearly illegal. Okay, so if it's illegal, you must act. We could start with conditions being placed on Israel for continued, and by the way, not just settlement produce, it's the companies, British companies, international companies that work and profit from these illegal colonies. And still allowed to work without any consequences. We could start with conditions being placed on Israel for continued financial and military aid, especially from the US and the UK, that stipulates adherence to international law. We could start with referring Israel to international courts, whether the Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court, to ensure accountability. And the interest is not just justice for what happened, which is an important goal and must be achieved, but deterrence. So that officer, that soldier will think twice before pulling a trigger on a civilian or on a taxi or on a child or anybody. But none of this is happening, my friends. In fact, the mere mention of boycotting settlements, products, or sanctioning companies working in these settlements, again, war crimes, remember, under international law, is met with the chorus of cries that boycotts do not work, that this is not helpful, that this is counterproductive. Was it counterproductive when you are imposing boycotts now on Russia because of the invasion of Ukraine, or the sanction regime on Iran, or what's this selectivity? And the UK, the US, many European countries voted against, though they lost the vote, against our attempt to bring Israel to the International Court of Justice for an advisory opinion in December this last year. The US, the UK voted against a UN General Assembly request of the International Court of Justice to give us an advisory opinion on the legal status of what I've just described of the occupation. How far some Western governments go out of their way to shield, to protect, to put one entity above the law, above the rules. So, my friends, yes, the international community has failed us. It has done more. It has, in fact, failed itself. This is not just about us. Because Palestine is not just about the Palestinians and the Palestinian rights. It is about the equal implementation of international law and international human rights law. It is about global justice. Look at the difference between Palestine and Ukraine, where Western policies are very keen indeed to uphold international law. And as I said earlier, why the double standards? We have grappled with these double standards from the beginning of this issue for 75 years now. And just like Israel's system is intrinsically stacked against the Palestinian people, inherently, structurally stacked against us, the international community and the international media with it appear to be inherently biased against the Palestinian cause. And I can attest to this as a Palestinian voice and representative. To use just one small example, I get invited always and media attention to have my comments when Israelis are harmed. And as I always say, every life loss is a tragedy and we must stop violence. This is a cycle that has gone for a long time. But the attention will not be on us when 235 Palestinians are shot, when 35 in 1 month are slaughtered. And this is a structural issue. As if Palestinian lives do not matter, are not worthy, is of a different color. And I've been making this point everywhere I go. Because it is about time that we challenge this chronic bias that has lasted for a long time. Rarely I get invited to speak when Palestinians are killed to discuss the violence of the Israel's occupation. And remember, the responsibility of an occupying army that belongs to a government that is state-sponsored is way more the responsibility of individuals who... Mind you, I would constantly be in some television studios, as I said, or another. The international community has not just failed, it is complicit. Some quarters are complicit. This entangling the bias of Western countries and Western media narratives will be the key to unraveling the Palestine issue and securing peace and justice for all. The Amnesty report, my friends, on Israel apartheid is very important in this endeavor. Very important. But there is a long way still to be traveled. I hope you are willing to travel with us on this road because Palestine affects us all. Thank you. Thank you very much.